Okay, welcome back. Let's talk about theta. Now, theta is a really important Greek because it measures what happens to your position if time passes. And we know that options are decaying assets, right? They have an expiration date. So if they have an expiration date, the value of them must be changing because at expiration time, we know they're not going to be worth anything. So there's something that happens to a position, and so theta helps us know how much of that, how much is that going to affect my P&L if 1 day passes or 2 days pass. How much will that affect my profit or my loss? I want to know that. I want to know how much risk I have if I let this position go on. And by the way, it could be moving in my favor as well. So again, we got our three main option Greeks. Theta measures the sensitivity to time. It can move in your favor. In other words, if time passes, you could be profiting, or it could be costing you money as time passes, just depending on, did you construct a position with negative or positive theta? Well, we need to know that. Okay, so theta, to get a little more specific on the definition, it measures the change in value of an option as time passes. To be specific, as 1 day passes, right? So the value of the theta that you see represented on the analytical software I'm going to show you on the Thinkorswim platform, that value, that number, is going to represent the change of to my P&L in 1 day. In other words, if 1 day passes, the theta number will tell me how much my position will increase or decrease. There's a few other terms, and we're going to look at an example of this, so just hold that thought for a moment. There's a few other terms that you might hear people throw around. Some people will call it time decay. That's an appropriate way of saying it. Some people call it theta decay, which I think is a little redundant, but I've heard that. And sometimes you'll hear time value, because the time value, you remember there was a one video we did called intrinsic versus extrinsic value. If you haven't watched that, it might be worth refreshing or watching it, because it does come into play as we start looking at particularly theta. What decays is only the extrinsic value of an option. The intrinsic value is kind of locked in. It's not going to decay because that part is in the money, and what it says is the value of the option already exceeds the strike of the option already exceeds what the underlying, or vice versa, the underlying exceeds what the value or the strike price is. So there's intrinsic value, and we went over all that. So again, you might want to refresh, but theta measures the decay of the value of only the time value or the extrinsic value. Again, not to worry too much because the analytics software produces a lot of this. Okay, let's take a look at how this looks in the analytics software. We looked at this position once before. This is a position in Apple, fairly large position with 10 contracts sold and 10 contracts bought. You can see what we did here is we sold some at 155, went further out of the money to less expensive, and bought some at 145. So because we sold more expensive than what we bought, there's a net credit, in this case of about $5. Now that $5 times 100 for each contract is 500, times 10 positions is 5,000. So I have a $5,000 credit when I opened this. Again, fairly large position. You can see 0 to 10,000. I have a $5,000 credit when I open this, and I've got about $5,000 in risk. So this is the current price right here of where Apple was at when I put this on. 156 is about where we're at. So this position, and the number I want to look at to start with here is, or most closely, is the theta number, which is a positive theta number of 10. So what that means is my P&L, my profit, my position will increase by $10 if 1 day passes. Now, that of course assumes nothing else changes, that, you know, our price risk is here. We can see that if a day passed, but price, say, went up by $2, I might be up $500. I don't know. It depends on everything else. But if everything else stayed the same, just a day passing alone will help us increase the value here. So you can sort of see that visually as well. The magenta line, remember, the magenta line is the value of things today. So the magenta line says if today price were to go to 160, the value would be up a little bit. If it were to go to 150, the value would be down. So that's the magenta line. Expiration is here. So we know that in time, at expiration, the magenta line has to go to the blue line. That has to happen because I already know the value at the end. So when expiration comes, this current value line has to be at the expiration line. So therefore it has to move up. So this is just the passage of time. As time goes by, I'm going to have positive theta. And most of the time when you see a magenta line like this, you'll see that you have positive theta. Now if the magenta line is way above the blue line, it has to go down. So if price were over here, I'd have negative theta. So let's look at this one because I want to show you also that theta can be negative. So in this example, and it might look familiar because we used it in one of the previous modules, but we bought two. We're just straight out buying two calls, and they happen to be at 360. This is on Lockheed Martin, and they cost about 20 bucks a piece, right? So 20 times 100 is 2,000, right? And two of them is going to be about 4,000. So you can see here that we do have about 4,000 at risk, give or take. So right now, though, we haven't lost that 4,000. This is a position where we just bought a call, meaning we have 100 deltas, and we're expecting if price goes up $1, we're going to make $100 and so on. But the important number I want to look at right now is theta. Notice the negative theta number. This magenta line will eventually make its way to the blue line, and so it has to lose a little value each day, and it starts out by losing $10 in one day. So all things being equal, if nothing else changes and just a day passes, I'm going to be down $10. Now, the reason I would do this is if I was bullish on a position and I said, well, I don't mind risking 10 bucks, 20 bucks, 30 bucks because I'm expecting to make 500. That's how you would counter that. But just know that you have positive theta and negative theta positions. Now, I will tell you up front that when I create a position for myself personally, probably 95 to maybe more percent of the time, I create positive theta positions. I prefer to not have time working against me, and most of the time I try to create something that's very delta neutral, so I don't care where price goes as long as time passes, and time is always going to pass. So I'm happy with positive theta positions, but not everybody does that. It's worth knowing that you can get into negative theta positions, and sometimes they're worthwhile. So it just depends, but you need to know what they are and that they work both ways. Okay, so a couple other things about theta. Theta does change as the underlying price changes. Now, we looked at an example. I'm going to go back a couple slides because I want to go back to this example. Remember, I said we have positive theta because price is here. But if price was over here, you'd see negative theta. So it would gradually change between here and here. If it were right here, where the magenta line and the blue line are close, you'd probably have theta very close to 0. And then it would start to go negative as you went further down. So there are things, depending on the structure, that when the underlying price changes, if it changes enough, it can impact the theta. Generally, it has to go a distance, but just know that that's a possibility. Theta also can change just as time passes. So even though it's a measure of the value as time passes, the theta will also change. I'll give you an example of that. Let's say you were in this position that we looked at, we know that it's going to go up $10, right? This is going to move up 10 on my P&L over here. So eventually, though, it's going to get to the top. Now, as it gets closer and closer to the top, there just isn't much more room for it to go. So there are times when you get close to the expiration line where the theta will actually go down to almost nothing because there just isn't any time left. But theta does change as time passes, and it also changes if implied volatility changes. You can have a big movement there as well. So, which we are going to talk about in the next video. We will get on to vega and implied volatility. We'll leave this one here, and we'll see you there.